right now, like inside your gut, there's this thriving kingdom of microscopic survivalists. And we are talking about organisms whose direct ancestors literally cut their teeth in the boiling acid in toxic oceans of prehistoric Earth, like 3.5 billion years ago.
Yeah, the real ancient history.
Right. And they make up roughly 4% of your entire microbiome, which, translates to trillions of microbes. And the wild part,
What's that?
they are completely rewriting the rules of what we thought we knew about human digestion, weight management, and metabolism. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Today is March 14th, 2026, and we are going on a journey into the hidden, ancient landscape of your own biology.
It really is a hidden landscape, too, because, for decades when we talked about gut health, we focused almost exclusively on bacteria.
Right, like probiotics.
Exactly. We treated the gut like this pristine little garden where you plant some probiotic seeds, your standard lactobacilli, and you just kind of hope they bloom. But the material we are exploring today completely shatters that manicured image.
It really does, because when I was looking through the research guiding our conversation today specifically, this fascinating breakdown from wellness innovator Laurent Fabian over at Ingredientsage, the thing that immediately stopped me in my tracks was this entirely separate category of microbes called archaea. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the very first conceptual hurdle we really need to clear is that these trillions of organisms living inside you right now are absolutely not bacteria.
They are not. And that is such a crucial distinction to make because archaea represent a completely distinct third domain of life.
A third domain.
Right.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, you have bacteria in one corner.
Okay.
You have eukaryotes in another corner. And that group includes, everything from plants to fungi to animals and obviously us humans.
Right.
And then you have archaea in their own entirely separate category. And what's really mind-bending from an evolutionary standpoint is that archaea are actually closer relatives to us than they are to bacteria.
See, that is just wild to try and wrap your head around.
I know, right?
A microscopic, single-celled organism is closer to me on the evolutionary family tree than it is to the bacteria sitting literally right next to it in my stomach.
It's incredible. I mean, they evolved roughly 3.5 billion years ago.
Yeah.
And if you picture Earth 3.5 billion years ago, you shouldn't picture like a hospitable place.
Definitely not.
No. There was virtually no oxygen in the atmosphere. Temperatures were totally erratic and extreme, and the oceans were essentially this boiling toxic soup of harsh chemicals.
Yeah, Fabian's article really highlights that archaea are famous in the scientific community for being the ultimate extremophiles.
Extremophile.
Exactly, that they are the absolute survivalists of the microbial world.
Mm.
We are talking about organisms that casually thrive in boiling hot springs at Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah.
They live in hypersaline lakes that would, instantly pickle a cucumber.
Yep.
And they flourish around deep ocean hydrothermal vents where the physical pressure of the water would literally crush a titanium nuclear submarine.
Right, and they don't just survive in those conditions, they actively thrive.
Wow.
Over billions of years, they developed these incredibly sophisticated metabolic pathways to extract energy from harsh chemical compounds like sulfur and ammonia that would honestly instantly corrode and kill almost any other living cell on Earth.
Okay, but this is exactly where I want to push back, because logically, it just doesn't quite add up.
Okay, go ahead.
If these things love boiling acid and the crushing depths of the ocean floor, how and why are they happily chilling in our soft, delicate human intestines?
That's a great question.
I mean, it feels like taking a deep-sea monster and dropping it into a suburban kiddie pool.
That's a funny way to look at it.
Like, they must have some sort of microscopic Kevlar armor to survive passing through our highly acidic stomach and setting up shop in our gut, right?
Well, the Kevlar armor analogy is actually perfectly accurate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it comes down to a fundamentally different cellular architecture. So think about standard bacteria. They have relatively simple cell walls made of a substance called peptidoglycan. Functionally, you can picture a bacterial cell wall kind of like a chain link fence.
A chain link fence, got it.
Right. It does a decent job keeping the cell together, but under extreme stress like high heat or, a bath of stomach acid, that chain link fence will eventually melt and break apart.
Right, the acid just kind of eats right through the links.
Precisely. But archaea, they possess cell membranes composed of entirely different materials, specifically something called ether-linked lipids.
Ether-linked lipid.
Yes. And in the world of chemistry, an ether bond is incredibly strong. So if bacteria are using a chain link fence, the archaea are essentially welding solid, thick steel plates together.
Wow, so they're building tanks.
Exactly. The atoms in those ether-linked lipids are locked together in this geometric way that stomach acid, extreme heat, or high pressure literally cannot pry apart.
That's crazy.
It is. It is an entirely different structural engineering.
So they really are wearing impenetrable armor.
Well, I wouldn't say totally indestructible. I mean, they can still be starved out if you stop feeding them, which we'll get into later.
Right, right.
But structurally, yes, they are the hardest workers in the room. And in the context of your gut, this incredible structural stability means they can maintain consistent, thriving populations even when your internal environment gets chaotic.
Because our gut environments do get chaotic.
Oh, constantly. Your other gut bacteria might fluctuate wildly because of a sudden change in your diet or a massive spike in your cortisol from stress or, a bout of food poisoning.
Right, and the normal bacteria just die off in droves.
Exactly. But the archaea, they just weather the storm.
Okay, so they have this incredibly resilient, welded steel armor.
Mm-hmm.
But, biology is famously efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies wouldn't tolerate trillions of invincible microbes just taking up free real estate and doing nothing.
No, absolutely not.
They must be paying rent somehow. So what exactly are they doing all day inside our digestive tract?
Oh, they are working incredibly hard, and they are doing it in a very highly specialized way. They function essentially as the master regulators of your digestive environment.
Okay, so Fabian's research introduces us to the star player of the human gut, archaea. It has a bit of a mouthful of a name, Methanobrivibacter smithii.
Right. Or M. smithii for short.
That's smithii, got it. And it's what scientists classify as a methanogen.
Right, meaning it produces methane gas as the primary byproduct of its metabolic process.
And I know the moment you hear the word methane, you might immediately worry that hosting these things means you're going to become like a walking gas factory.
Which is a very fair concern.
Right. But the biological mechanics of how this works are actually genius. So let's think about your digestive system like a complex car engine.
Okay, I like that.
When the normal, everyday bacteria in your gut break down complex carbohydrates and dietary fiber from your meals, they produce hydrogen gas as a waste product.
Which, just to be clear, is a totally normal part of bacterial fermentation.
Exactly. But here is the problem. Fermentation is a chemical reaction. And according to the laws of chemistry, if the waste products of a reaction build up too much, the reaction is thirst to stop.
Right, it shooks itself out.
Yeah, if that hydrogen gas just sits there and accumulates in your gut, it acts exactly like a clogged exhaust pipe on a car.
Mm-hmm.
The physical pressure of the gas builds up, the environment becomes completely toxic to the bacteria, and the whole digestive engine just stalls out. And that is when you experience severe bloating, cramping, and that sluggish, heavy feeling.
And what's fascinating here is exactly how M. smithii steps in to solve this chemical bottleneck.
How so?
It engages in a microscopic process called interspecies hydrogen transfer.
Interspecies hydrogen transfer.
Yeah, it literally acts as a biological vacuum cleaner.
Okay.
It eats that excess hydrogen that the bacteria are desperately trying to get rid of, uses it for its own energy, and converts it into methane.
And methane is better.
Oh, much better. Methane takes up significantly less volume, and your body can then easily eliminate it.
So it's the ultimate exhaust system. Like it's releasing the pressure valve so the factory can keep running.
It is. It keeps the engine running at peak capacity. But the biological implications of this go so much deeper than just, preventing a little post-dinner bloating.
Right. There's always a bigger picture.
Always. By constantly clearing out that hydrogen exhaust, archaea act as true ecosystem engineers. They engage in a process known as niche construction.
Niche construction.
Yeah.
Meaning they aren't just surviving in their environment, they're actively building and shaping the chemical landscape around them.
Exactly. By keeping the hydrogen gas levels incredibly low, they create the absolute perfect, optimal chemical environment for your other beneficial bacteria to thrive and do their most important jobs.
And what are those jobs?
Well, arguably the most critical job those bacteria have is producing short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
Right. The research focuses heavily on 3 specific SCFAs, butyrate, propionate, and acetate.
Yes, and if we connect this to the bigger picture of your overall well-being, these SCFAs are critical. When archaea clear the exhaust, the bacteria are free to work overtime, producing significantly higher, healthier levels of these compounds.
And, if you're wondering why this specific chemical reaction deep in your intestines actually matters to your daily life, it's because these SCFAs are basically the foundational pillars of your immune system and your mood.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, these short-chain fatty acids literally serve as the primary food source nourishing the cells that line your intestinal walls, right?
Yep. They actively regulate the pH balance of your gut. They circulate through your bloodstream to lower systemic inflammation throughout your entire body.
That's amazing.
They even cross the blood-brain barrier to support your brain function, memory, and mood through the gut-brain axis.
Wow. All because this one microbe is vacuuming up hydrogen.
Exactly. And we cannot forget their role in maintaining the intestinal barrier itself. The research strongly suggests that the environment created by archaea plays a direct role in keeping those intestinal walls tight and secure.
Right, because if that barrier becomes compromised...
Which is what people in the wellness space often call leaky gut.
Yeah, leaky gut.
If that happens, undigested food particles and toxins can slip into your bloodstream. And that leads to a massive immune response, which can trigger autoimmune conditions, severe allergies, and chronic low-grade inflammation.
So by supporting optimal SCFA production, archaea are indirectly helping to fortify the very walls of your digestive fortress.
Exactly. They are the ultimate support crew.
So if this incredibly efficient microbial engine is doing all of this heavy lifting for our basic digestion and immune health, it naturally raises a bigger question.
Which is?
How does this incredibly efficient chemical factory affect the way our bodies manage our overall weight? Because that brings us to a part of the research that honestly gave me pause. It scales up to affect how our entire body stores and burns energy.
The metabolic connection. Yeah, this is currently the most heavily researched and debated frontier in the study of archaea.
Right. Fabian points out that when scientists analyze the microbiomes of people with metabolic conditions, like clinical obesity or type 2 diabetes, they find completely different populations and ratios of archaea compared to healthy, metabolically flexible individuals.
That's right.
Now, the research isn't saying the archaea directly caused the diseases all on their own, but they're clearly major foundational players in the room. But I have to admit, I got really tripped up on one specific mechanism here.
Oh, what part of the mechanism tripped you up?
Well, the research clearly states that because archaea make the whole bacterial fermentation process so highly efficient by vacuuming up the hydrogen, they actually help us extract more calories from our food.
They do, yes.
And my immediate logical thought was, wait a second, isn't extracting more calories from our food exactly what we don't want if we are trying to manage our weight? Like, doesn't a higher calorie extraction directly lead to weight gain? How on earth is extracting more energy considered a health benefit?
That is a very intuitive, logical question to ask, but it requires us to completely untangle some nuance about how human metabolism actually works.
Okay, untangle it for me.
It is not a simple, linear calories in, calories out equation here. Archaea are not some magic weight loss bullet, but rather they function as a highly sophisticated metabolic tuning system.
A metabolic tuning system.
Okay.
Explain how that works in practice.
Think of your metabolism less like a wood stove where you're just throwing logs on a fire, and more like a highly advanced smart thermostat.
The smart thermostat.
Right. While it's true that having certain archaea present maximizes calorie extraction from the fiber you eat, that's only half the story.
What's the other half?
The other half is what they do with those extracted resources. Specific types of archaea produce completely unique metabolites of their own, and these metabolites act as chemical messengers.
Messengers to the rest of the body.
Exactly. Some of them appear to actively enhance your body's cellular insulin sensitivity.
Oh, wow. Which means your body becomes much better at regulating your blood sugar.
Yes, you avoid those massive spikes and crashes, which means you are far less likely to store that extracted energy as visceral fat.
That's huge.
It is, but it goes even further than that. There is emerging fascinating evidence that these archaeal metabolites actually communicate directly with the gut hormones that signal to your brain about hunger and satiety.
Wait, really?
Yes. They are actively involved in the chemical feedback loop that tells your brain, hey, we are fully fueled down here. You can turn off the hunger cravings now.
Wow. That makes so much more sense. So even though you technically extracted more absolute energy from the food, your body is suddenly utilizing it perfectly.
Exactly. It's not about trying to restrict the fuel. It's about optimizing the engine so the fuel isn't wasted or immediately stored as fat.
Right. It's telling your brain you are full and telling your cells to burn the energy cleanly.
Precise.
And there is a critical detail in Fabian's breakdown about exactly when this smart thermostat gets installed in our bodies, right?
Yes, the timing of early life colonization. This is an absolutely crucial piece of the puzzle.
Because it's different from regular bacteria.
Very different. Unlike bacteria, which begin colonizing an infant's gut quite literally the moment they are born and travel through the birth canal.
Right.
Archaea operate on a significant delay. They typically do not establish stable, permanent populations until much later in infancy, often around the time a child starts eating solid, complex foods.
And the specific timing of when they finally show up actually matters.
It matters immensely. Studies strongly suggest that the specific age at which archaea first colonize the gut and exactly which specific species of archaea manage to set up shop can fundamentally influence an individual's baseline metabolic programming for their entire adult life.
You're kidding.
No, it's essentially laying down the concrete foundation for how your body will handle energy, store fat, and regulate blood sugar for decades to come.
That is mind-blowing.
It really is.
The precise timing of an invisible microscopic survivalist arriving in your gut when you were 10 months old somehow dictates the efficiency of your metabolism when you are 40 years old.
That's a huge revelation.
So, if they are these masterminds of metabolism, these indestructible ecosystem engineers, why aren't archaea probiotics on the shelf of every single pharmacy and grocery store right now? Like, why am I just taking standard bacterial probiotics every morning?
Well, this brings us to the great frustration of modern microbiology. It's the cultivation problem.
A cultivation problem.
Yeah.
Right, because archaea are notoriously, infuriatingly stubborn.
Very stubborn.
If you take standard bacteria like the lactobacillus in your yogurt, you can swab them onto a little glass petri dish, give them a basic sugar solution, put them in an incubator, and they will happily multiply by the billions.
Yep, very easy to grow.
You can grow them in giant industrial steel vats and freeze-dry them into a capsule. But archaea, you try to put them in a cushy laboratory petri dish, and they just flat out refuse to cooperate. They die.
They do. But you have to remember exactly where they came from. They demand the extreme.
Because they're extremophiles.
Exactly. You are trying to artificially recreate a prehistoric environment. To get them to grow, a laboratory might need to create an atmosphere completely and totally devoid of oxygen.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard. They might require massive, crushing physical pressure or highly specific toxic mineral concentrations. And what makes it even harder is that in the gut, many of them rely on intensely complex symbiotic relationships with bacteria.
Right, the hydrogen transfer.
Exactly. They literally need the specific waste products of specific bacteria just to survive. You can't just isolate an archaea cell, put it in a tube by itself, and expect it to live. It's like taking a crucial gear out of a watch and wondering why it won't tick.
So if we couldn't grow them in a lab, and we couldn't isolate them in a petri dish, how did scientists even figure out they were inside our guts doing all this heavy lifting in the first place?
It's a great story, actually.
Because they were basically invisible for decades, right?
They were. If we connect this to the bigger picture of scientific history, it perfectly illustrates how pure technological innovation drives biological discovery.
Yeah.
The breakthrough that revealed the archaea wasn't a better recipe for a petri dish. It was the digital revolution of next-generation DNA sequencing and the field of metagenomics.
Right. The shift to culture-independent methods.
Exactly. Eventually, scientists just got frustrated and stopped trying to force these microbes to grow in a glass dish. Instead, they took a totally different approach.
What did they do?
They took samples of human gut contents, blended them up, and used supercomputers to extract and sequence every single fragment of genetic material present in the sample.
Oh, wow.
It is exactly like taking a massive census of a huge city. Instead of knocking on every single door and trying to drag the residents out for an interview, you just hack into the city's property records to see who owns what.
That's a great analogy. And when they finally ran that digital census data, they suddenly saw the biological signatures of trillions of archaea that had been completely invisible to traditional science.
It opened up an entirely hidden world overnight. They could see not just who was living there, but by reading the DNA, they could see exactly what metabolic functions they were capable of performing.
They could read the blueprints of the chemical factories.
Exactly.
But this technological hurdle creates a very real practical limitation for us right now, today, as consumers.
It does.
Because they're so incredibly hard to cultivate at an industrial scale, and because the government regulatory landscape is totally unmapped for this brand new third domain of life. Most of the products marketed as archaea probiotics that you might see on the internet today don't actually contain a single live archaea cell.
That's right, and consumers need to be aware of that. They are functionally very different from your standard bacterial probiotic capsule.
They aren't giving you new seeds to plant in the garden.
No.
Instead, these supplements contain highly specific, targeted nutrients designed to feed and support the archaea populations you already have living inside you.
Yes. They are essentially high-tech precision fertilizer, not new plants.
And that's an incredibly important distinction for anyone proactively looking to optimize their health. You cannot just replace them. You are forced to work with and rehabilitate the specific ecosystem you already possess.
Right.
So, if we are stuck with the ecosystem we have, and we can't just easily pop a magic archaea pill to fix our metabolism and banish our bloating, how do the choices we make every single day impact these ancient microbes?
Well,
Like, if we are the landlords of this ecosystem, how do we properly care for our tenants?
it starts, perhaps unsurprisingly, with what we choose to put on our plates.
Diet.
The research highlights several fascinating observational studies looking at people across widely different geographies and cultural lifestyles.
And what did they find?
The clear, undeniable takeaway is that people who consume very diverse, fiber-rich, plant-based diets have incredibly abundant, highly diverse archaea populations.
Because you have to feed the bacteria the raw materials first.
Exactly. It's a supply chain. Conversely, when you look at populations consuming highly processed, low-fiber Western diets, they are effectively starving the archaea out of existence.
Because there's no fiber to ferment.
Right. If you eat a diet of pure simple sugars and processed grains, you are depriving your bacteria of the complex carbohydrates they need to ferment. If the bacteria don't ferment, they don't produce hydrogen gas.
And if there is no hydrogen gas, the archaea have absolutely no fuel to survive.
Exactly. The entire ecosystem collapses from the bottom up.
But diet isn't the only factor at play here, and here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The research uncovers this massive, eye-opening revelation about archaea and modern medicine. It's the antibiotic paradox.
Yes. This is genuinely one of the most profound and clinically relevant insights to come out of this entire field of research in the last decade.
We all know that taking a course of antibiotics can be incredibly rough on your stomach.
Oh, for sure.
They do their job. They wipe out the bad pathogenic bacteria causing your sinus infection or your strep throat.
Right.
But they are broad spectrum, meaning they also carpet bomb all the good bacteria in your gut.
Right.
But let's rewind to what we discussed earlier about archaea. They have those welded steel, ether-linked lipid cell membranes. They're a completely different domain of life from bacteria, which means they are naturally completely resistant to almost all standard pharmaceutical antibiotics.
The antibiotics literally wash right over them without making a dent.
Exactly. You take a heavy 10-day course of antibiotics, and you completely decimate the bacterial side of your gut ecosystem. The chain link fences are destroyed.
Yep.
But the archaea, in their steel armor, survive the blast, completely untouched.
And this specific dynamic perfectly explains a long-standing medical mystery.
What's the mystery?
It's exactly why so many people suffer from prolonged, sometimes severe digestive issues, like chronic bloating, new food intolerances, and irregular digestion for months or even years after they've finished a simple course of antibiotics.
Because the perfectly choreographed microbial dance is broken.
Exactly.
The archaea are sitting there, perfectly healthy and ready to work, but their bacterial partners, the ones that are supposed to be producing the hydrogen they need to eat, are completely wiped out.
Yeah. The ecosystem is totally out of sync.
Wow.
It is a profound structural disruption of the gut environment. You essentially have an overpopulation of the cleanup crews standing around with nothing to clean.
And meanwhile,
The few beneficial bacteria that survived are desperately struggling to reestablish themselves, but they can't because their ecosystem engineers aren't functioning properly to keep the environment optimal. It's gridlock.
gut gridlock.
Yeah.
Man. So knowing all of this, knowing that diet fuels the supply chain, knowing that antibiotics fundamentally break the dance, and knowing that we cannot just take a quick pill to replace them.
Okay.
What is your practical advice for the listener today?
Right.
Like, how do we actually apply this dense biological knowledge to our daily lives?
The first and arguably the hardest piece of advice to accept is that you need patience. Yes. You have to understand that archaea operate on a totally different, much slower biological timescale than bacteria. You cannot fix a disrupted archaeal ecosystem overnight.
Right.
Taking a standard bacterial probiotic might give you some mild symptomatic relief from bloating in a few days, but rebuilding a stable, robust archaeal environment is a long-term, months-long project.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint. You are literally rehabilitating a ruined landscape.
Precisely. You need a comprehensive, holistic approach to gut health. That means consistently, day in and day out, eating a wide variety of diverse, fiber-rich whole foods to fuel the bacterial fermentation that the archaea entirely rely on.
Okay.
It also means actively managing your psychological stress levels and prioritizing adequate deep sleep.
Because stress and sleep affect it too.
Oh, immensely.
Yeah.
We know that systemic cortisol and sleep deprivation physically disrupt the chemical environment of the gut.
Wow. Okay. And obviously having very serious conversations with your doctor about avoiding unnecessary broad-spectrum antibiotics whenever it is safely possible, specifically to protect that delicate ancient balance.
Exactly. And finally, when you are navigating the wellness space and looking at supplements, specifically those precision fertilizers designed to support your archaea, you must demand transparency. Look for products that are backed by actual peer-reviewed human trials, not just isolated petri dish experiments. Be incredibly wary of any product or influencer promising a miraculous overnight metabolic fix.
Right, because we are dealing with a wildly complex, ancient, 3.5-billion-year-old system, not just a quick biological hack.
Right. Legitimate science-backed products in this specific space will always focus on the gradual, sustained, long-term support of your existing microbiome, not overnight miracles.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom all the way back out. We started this deep dive looking at a kingdom of absolute extremophiles, organisms that cut their teeth, surviving the absolute harshest, most toxic, boiling conditions on a primordial Earth 3.5 billion years ago. And somehow, over millions of years of evolution, they found their way inside our bodies.
It's pretty poetic.
It is. They went from surviving boiling acid to becoming our essential internal cleanup crew, our ultimate ecosystem engineers, and the master tuners of our metabolism.
It really should completely reframe how we view our own biology.
Absolutely.
You are not just a single organism navigating the world. You are a walking, talking, incredibly complex, fine-tuned ecosystem.
You are hosting an ancient, powerful engine that demands to be properly fueled and deeply respected. But as we wrap up, there is one final, totally new thought that I haven't been able to shake. Something that builds on exactly what we discussed about how these microbes are colonized and how fragile that balance is.
What's that?
Well, we talked about how the specific timing of archaea colonization in early infancy essentially sets our metabolic programming for life, right?
Yes, it lays the foundation.
And we also talked about how broad-spectrum antibiotics severely disrupt that delicate bacteria archaea dance, causing this long-term gut gridlock.
Right.
So could the rise of hypersterile modern environments, combined with the heavy use of early childhood antibiotics, actually be the hidden foundational driver behind our global metabolic and obesity epidemics?
Oh, wow.
Like, if we are unintentionally destroying the ecosystem engineers before they even get a chance to build the smart thermostat in our babies, it makes you wonder if that's the real root of the metabolic crisis. And that is a profound mystery about our ancient microbial partners to mull over long after this deep dive ends.